kicks it off. Oh, it is recording. I don't know how much of the curse words were involved in that, but the beginning is on the way.
I mean, that's quite a good opening. Fuck. Yeah, shit, we're live.
I was gonna say let's stop that because it was so shit, but we'll keep it going. Fuck it. So yeah, topic was this episode 24, as you said.
Yeah.
The last episode I named Nanaconda just because I couldn't think of anything, and it just randomly came in my head. I don't even know what that means. I don't think it has a meaning, Anaconda. But that's what last episode was called.
Yeah. 24 can rhyme with sore. It rhymes with sore, so we call it sore topic. Like, we've got sore topics. Because there are a couple of sore topics that.
Sorry. Oh, sore. I thought when you said sore, I thought you were referring to SAW. And
SORE. Yeah, that kind of sore topics.
In with your pet peeves on. Well,
and like, it's so funny. It's like one of like my Swiss mates. Like, we keep on having like this miscommunications because of the nuance of the English language. There's so many words with triple and double meanings, and so much is like context based. But like, it's like saw. Like, I saw you, seesaw, saw us in that fucking hurts. It's like, like the language is full of it. Two can be like, to you, and two can be, me too, and two can be the number, and it's the English language, wonderful. It flows like a toilet. you can say all kinds of shit. Yeah.
Language world, and I believe that because.
Oh no! Yeah.
I think like primitive, not primitive. That's not really the correct word, but kind of the default of success for organisms is obviously taking control of other organisms, expanding, whatever words you want to throw in there. Some people might throw in colonialism. Some people might throw into the equation like just conquering, which is probably a better term. But I think it all derives from language. I think to have a language which is simple enough for your own society to understand is going to enable obviously greater communication and outreach, and consequently greater development, and then expansion, and then essentially genetic expansion to a degree. I mean, comfort is inherited until it defeats itself in the age that we're in, when we become too comfortable, like the Romans, and the gluttony and the fucking transgenders and all this nonsense start entering the equation, like nonsensical notions. But before that, everything is kind of orientated around communication. So like all these languages which are so difficult to comprehend and understand, it kind of prevents that kind of, I don't know, that organizational structure which allows for trade and understanding between nations, and creates kind of negotiations and truces and contracts and all that kind of stuff. When you think of like fucking Hungarian or Finnish languages that are so bloody alien to the rest of the world.
100%. Like, simplicity is genius, as they say.
But at the same time, I'm kind of, go for it.
Yeah. Simplicity is genius. It's like, some of the best inventions are some of the most simple. Like the wheel, it's a circle that transports things, that is self-serving, that goes on natural. You put a wheel and let it roll down a hill, just like, the gradient and the wheel just does its thing. Doesn't require much, a little bit of weight, a little bit of force, a bit of Newtonic energy, and there you go. You've got like a carriage. And if you have like a language that doesn't have all of these rules, doesn't have masculine, feminine, formal, informal, doesn't have all of these conjugations that all these other languages have, it's easier. And if you want, a language that's going to be palatable for, like you said, for trade and for people to be able to understand and pick up and get on board, it definitely extends your reach. I agree fully.
It's funny you should say that as well, because something came up recently with respect to cars, the design and success of the motor vehicle, and its origins in the culture that it stems from, which is, of course, language. When you think of like French cars, they're typically, I don't know, not very reliable, but quite pretty. You know, classic Citroens or Peugeots or Renaults are
Renaults, yeah, my Renault is very pretty indeed.
representative of French society. But when you think of like
Mm.
a car, German cars are handsome and they work. And then I guess you've got the Japanese car, which is the balance, you know, the practicality, and
Mm.
it's well molded. It really fits well the society. And I think, you know, with your example of the wheel,
American cars, oversized,
yeah,
big, loud, greedy, 4-liter engines. Absolutely, absolutely agreed. Yeah,
it really is all interlinked. It really,
yeah.
you know, language and, you know, communication and all that kind of stuff. So, uh, fuck, what were we even talking about? How did that come about? What was the origin of that?
Simplicity is genius. Language, how language extends the reach, allows. Yeah.
So going into the thing that you told me, should we use that as the kind of intro? The feminist, is it feminist?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Far away.
So there's this question. I mean, I detest the doom scroll and I detest the TikTok, but thankfully, by virtue of my lady friend doing such, I came across a question that's been posed as a serious question, even though it's probably the most unserious. No, that's not a word, but it's like, probably like the most unserious question I've ever heard in my life. And it's actually disturbing. I get triggered. My palms are sweating just reiterating what I heard. There's a question going around that's going viral, and many of the listeners might have even heard this question. Is would you rather be, as a woman or as a child, left alone in the woods with a bear or a man? I mean, um, yeah, this is the days now where like sexism against men is just completely, yeah, completely allowed. Quite similar to how, you know, racism against, when I say racism, maybe like culturally inappropriate jokes or kind of like the way they kind of like allow, you know, a comedian can maybe, it's more cool for like a comedian to make fun of like a white guy, but you know, if a white guy makes fun of like a black guy, it's, you know, and this is like a just like a way more extreme version of that, because it's like what, like, number one, men are protectors of women naturally by nature. Men, you know, less than 1% of men are murderers and killers, whereas maybe 99% or more than 99% of bears, if you're left alone with them, will probably take your head off or maim you for life with one swipe, as is their nature. It's not the nature of a man to harm anybody, especially a woman. In fact, men are way more likely to harm other men than women. This is just an absolute fact. Another thing that I find very disturbing is that they're asking people these questions on the street, and lots of your typical, like, you know, libtards were saying things like, yeah, yeah, man. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, a man's more dangerous than a bear. Like, a man can do 1,000 things to you. Like, yeah, a bear won't do 1,000 things to you. The bear will just fucking maim you and kill you. Um, I mean, how this is actually a question is disturbing. It shows further the intellectual regression of society. 50 years ago, everybody would say, I would not want to be left alone with a bear. In 2024, when he is she and Dave is now I don't know, Sandra. Yeah, it seems to be that somehow a man who, you know, yeah, we all are alone with at some point and don't get killed 99.99999% of the time, is somehow been marketed or propagandized as more deadly than a beer. I mean, it's so triggering. Yeah, John, if you can extend on that, please do.
Oh, the first thing that came to mind then actually was the Gillette advert that went viral intentionally, of course, about 5 or so years ago. I think it was just before the COVID scam. And it was obviously Gillette is a company that's marketed towards men for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Until you expect a customer base to be protected and to be, sponsored and a kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? There should be praise given times to one's customer base. Well, that's where your bread and butter comes from. The survival of your business and your workforce is dependent on you convincing that market that you are good for them. And the Gillette marketing team decided instead to make a commercial which was about toxic masculinity and how men shouldn't, cause harm to women and others, and how they really need to put a stop to their evil doings. And this is a fucking company that's trying to sell you razors and fucking hair lotion and everything. And it's, again, it's reached that point where, as we've spoken about before, there is no independence in the corporate world. It's all a derivative of one centralized system intent on, displaying these kind of satanic notions of what they believe is right. In fact, it's all, of course, morally wrong, spiritually wrong. And with respect to this whole kind of feminist ideal, that's, again, as we've covered many times, just a derivative of gender, which started with the Bauhaus movement and all that kind of stuff, whether it's LGBT or transgenderism, which is part of transhumanism, or this toxic masculinity stuff, or kind of dating. It actually is interesting because I thought, and we've had this discussion before, I believe that there is no such thing as many terms that are deemed normative, I don't believe exist. And actually, let's bring it up again, because I don't believe there's such a thing as racism, right? When you break the term down, there is discrimination, of course, people discriminating. But racism is a term that is affixed to the idea that law protects those that are discriminated against on a racial basis, right? The term is synonymous to that protection across all racial profiles. And actually, it's not, as we know, as that example shows, and not just with race, but sexism as well, is a term that I don't believe in. And it isn't an actual valid term, because as long as one is able to treat another differently under the kind of reins of law, then the term is self-defeating, isn't it? And like you said, comedians can happily make fun of certain races and not others, and not just races. No one ever talks about the Jews in comedy, or if they do, it's a very
you're cancelled. Your career's over. You may even end up dead.
Exactly, you end up losing.
You might fall out of a window. You might fall out of a window and commit suicide if you do that. Yeah.
And, these kinds of actions work on all kinds of levels from all different sides. It's not just, you're not always the victim in comedy if you're white. You can be the victim if you're, of a certain, creed, disposition, religion, all this kind of stuff. But that is in itself, facts and evidence to suggest that these terms have absolutely no value. And it's because when it's sponsored by the law, the very law that is being put in place to ensure that an equal footing is supposedly structured for all dispositions, to not have that be sponsored and supported and upheld shows that the whole thing is just a farce and it's nonsense. And of course, it is nonsense as far as I'm concerned, because it's just biologically the norm for people to have opinions. And of course, opinions can spread from the type of butter you like, the type of bread you like, type of color you want your house painted, to the levels of animosity and hatred you have towards different things, whether it's buildings, humans, nature, all these different aspects of our livelihoods. So the idea that one can come along and say, well, no, it's an absolute objective wrong for you to despise or have animosity towards a certain race no longer holds sway, because the same people that preach that agenda, both structurally in a law and just the opinion of a cultural narrative, will happily discriminate. LGBT is another thing that is so utterly ridiculous, utterly ridiculous. We have a flag that is being waved around with a brown stripe for brown people, a black stripe for black people, amongst all the other bloody stupid stripes that no one understands.
A pink stripe for white people, maybe. There's a white stripe in there too, by the way.
Represent what? Represents some fucking, I don't know, undecided sexual term.
Yeah, so but there is a white stripe in there, though. Like, you know, they've made sure that, you know, no one can escape the LGBT. Nobody, everyone's included.
It's everyone's included unless you're white. And this is also another thing. If you're to believe in the term
LGBT, you think in
no, in LGBT, white aren't included. That's the only group that's not represented in their flag. This is what's hilarious. It's an inclusive group, which you're allowed to join if you're gay, but presumably you can't join then if you're gay and white, because they've included a brown stripe. They've got an Asian stripe now as well, but I don't know if it's yellow.
Oh no, there's definitely a white stripe in there in the flag. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but the stripe doesn't represent white people. We looked it up before. It represents like some queer thing, which is another manipulation, because I think people think it represents white people, but it doesn't. Whereas the brown stripe represents brown people. Okay. And the black stripe represents black people. And that in itself, if you believe in the term racism, is racist, because to assert, firstly, that an entire group of people, based on their skin color, which has absolutely nothing to do with opinion whatsoever, because of their skin color, they support your ludicrous notion that sexuality is a determinative factor in social cohesiveness. To say that someone is gay and therefore likes all other gay people and all the other fucking things that are in this concoction of madness that, as we just specified, no one fucking understands, is so discriminatory. It's self-defeating, which is, of course, the whole point of the LGBT movement. It's ridiculous. It's like Black Lives Matter. It's ridiculous. All lives matter. But even that's a ridiculous term, because it shouldn't even have to be spoken about. All these things are intended to create divide. But LGBT really bothers me more than anything else, because the idea, the bullshit notion that's splayed out as the origin of this farcical endeavor is that it was, of course, at a period in time where people were discriminated against based on their sexuality, and they had less legal rights based off of that disposition, which is no longer the fucking case. You don't get any less rights in Western society if you're gay. And what's really funny is these people that are supposedly passionate about this nonsense will never go to fucking Saudi Arabia. They never go to places in the world and put themselves on the line in terms of their career and their livelihoods to places where actually people are victims, because that would require a bit of confidence and a bit of alphaism. And these people are absolute cowards, right? And another example, I'm situated in Soho now, which is quite ironic based on this topic. But in Soho, there is a living quarters, apartment blocks, only for people that are gay. And now at university, you can get a scholarship based on your sexuality. I don't know how they prove that. All of these things are openly discriminatory against people that aren't of that sexual disposition. But at the same time, and I will wrap this rant up, this is a fucking society that claims to enact equality amongst people's sexuality, right? Yet these people have created apartment complexes where you can only fucking go there if you're gay. So how inclusive is that? How inclusive is it not to include white people? How inclusive is it to fucking absurdly that all people, based on the fact that they're black and brown, sponsor gayness, which is really ironic.
It's because they're some of the most homophobic people in the world.
Exactly.
Fully. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, people are brown. Those countries are primarily traditional.
Those are the countries where they'll put a tar over your head and burn you in the street.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, historically. I mean, it's getting a little bit better now, but yeah, it's Yeah.
Yeah. And you remember of Oxford, sir, and it was taken fucking intentionally in this manner, and I know it. There are these really iconic photos of National Socialist Germany where you have these swastikas on the main boulevards of Berlin and Nuremberg, sorry, and, Munich and all these places, the big swastika flags, and you have the parades, the Germans going through, um, saying their tributes to Adolf Hitler and all that. And the same picture was taken with all those LGBT flags, I think, during the last Pride, which is a fucking ironic, mocking term, of course, as well, because how prideful must you be to walk down the street with your cock out in fucking thongs and heels with children around, sexualizing the next generation? You have no pride whatsoever. It's quite the contrary. And just the whole thing is just mockery, and people lap it up in the fucking same way as they put their virtue signaling flags for every other aspect of life that they're told to conform to. Oh, I have a Ukrainian flag with a mask on and a sign saying I'm vegan underneath, and I'm triple jabbed with A, B, C, D, E, F, G of the fucking satanic sequence. And, I have a Palestinian flag, but I won't mention the Jews, even though the Jews are, synonymous with Israel, because
exactly.
Right, so actually I have to put my neck on the line. I'm not going to, because they're a bunch of pussies. These people are fucking cowards. They always have been, and that is the purpose of Masonic mockery. It is a reversal of normative values that are implanted in all living organisms, whereby the strong rule and the weak come second. They've implanted artificially the weak, the perverted, the unsound minds at the top of the social spectrum to subsequently infect the coming generations. We're talking about all the pedophiles are on the schools, all the pedophiles are on the fucking political spheres. And it's these people driven by their sick sociopathic nature that will conform to anything that they're told to undertake, because the reward for them is that forbidden fruit that society won't openly allow them to have. It's all a giant but simple scheme. It's a pyramid scheme, and people can't seem to contemplate that it's realistic and plausible, because they don't understand that what they live in is a giant corporation. Just like in the office place, you have a fucking boss that manages a department. You have a boss that manages several departments, or like a division in the army, or a battalion, or a regiment. There's very few people managing thousands of souls, and that's the same principle. And it's compartmentalized, so not everyone knows what's going on the other fence. And it's that simple. And I'll leave that for you now.
Yeah, agreed. It's like, to extend on what you said about BLM, like the irony of it. So once again, like BLM's mission statement, one of like the first things that, their priority amongst, ahead of, any kind of maybe like, social injustice or whatever is, the rights of, gay and queer and transgender black people. Like, what the fuck? Like, when has that been like a mainstay issue? But that's number one. Number two, as we know, where does their funding come from? Ironically, their funding comes from somebody who is a discriminator himself, a Hungarian billionaire called George Soros. Number three, we know that all of the so-called founders are absolute shills, siphoning money from the organization. And then to, add to John's initial point, I mean, the fact that it's called Black Lives Matter is naturally gonna, it's gonna incense people. It's not necessarily like it just naturally human nature is going to make people feel like, we're not included. People that have like a slight inclination towards racism are going to be triggered, and they usually tend to do that as a divisive tactic. Absolutely. What happened when the whole BLM thing happened? There were riots, and there was even, more social unrest. It wasn't anything that caused peace, and that's, and that's the MO. The MO is to divide and conquer, and do it through things that are allegedly supposed to be, bringing people together to, create inclusivity. Like allowing, women to compete in, or men to compete in, women's sports, which obviously is going to cause outrage. Allowing, trannies and you know, essentially like paedophiles like go and twerk in front of kids in book clubs and libraries is going to incense people. No, parents are going to go with their fucking pickets and go and protest outside libraries and schools against that shit because it's quite perverse and inappropriate, for lack of a better term. So yeah, absolutely, everything is used as a divisive tactic. And they, you know, use these things such as sexuality, you know, and race as their topics of choice. And that's not to say that, yeah, absolutely, people that have a homosexual disposition absolutely have been persecuted, and that's the same, you know, by individuals, and by laws. Actually, I suppose systematically, it literally was illegal to be gay. I think up until like the 60s in, you know, in England. Yeah, so, you know, these things happen, and obviously, you know, we know about the history of, you know, yeah, discrimination against people of different ethnicities, etc. But yeah, it's now been weaponized. It's been weaponized, and movements that had a sense of authenticity, it's now going or gone, or the main bodies that have hijacked them are completely corrupt. And that's what I have to say on that.
100%.
The other thing that we're going to talk.
Do you know what's a perfect, what's the word I'm looking for? Addition is not the word, but it would do. What we were talking about just before we started recording, which is a few things that would bug us. And one thing I said was how these such conversations, a simple, normal conversation that people used to have amongst themselves with respect to all different subjects, it's called opinion. It's no longer something that people are willing to undertake. And it's deriving largely from people that formerly had confidence or are still the most confident people in society, which is, of course, what everything, how everything's kind of changed. You know, people from the weaker spells of society, i.e. the mass majority, the proletariat, whatever you want to call them, they will always follow the strong. And, you know, there are people that I follow and there are people that I like, you know, in the kind of, you know, what's the fucking word I'm looking for? Video streaming sphere, you know, whether it's on BitChute or Odyssey or YouTube or whatever. And, you know, people that do have an understanding of what's going on, people that understand about the fucking COVID scam, the pandemic, and people that are kind of adverse to living sustainably and who talk very articulately about, you know, philosophy and kind of things that we're interested in. But at the same time, there are so many people now of this caliber that are too scared to just say things, basic opinions, because it's like, oh, I can't mention the C word, the COVID, because, you know, whoa, it's going to get me sacked. I'm going to get demonetized. I'm going to lose my job. That is the exact reason why these things excel and succeed, because people can't fucking keep their mouths open. It's not about keeping your mouth shut. It's about keeping your mouth open. That is what keeps oxygen flowing into society. You know, you suffocate society if you're not willing to talk about the things that matter. And you know, it's really fucking irritating how, you know, I'm not talking about, you don't have to go out and go on a fucking 2-hour tangent about, you know, Judaism and, you know, it's influences. But, you know, just to say things like COVID is a scam, which is an objective truth now, because of course they do.
Provable factually
from
the sources themselves.
Same strategy, years and years and years and years and years and years and generations and millennia. It's been used, and people still, after it all, are too scared to talk about it. And these are the people that have the positions to influence others positively, and they're not willing to stick their neck out because they might make an extra or, you know, $15-20 less a day from their fucking AdSense on their various platforms. You know, you are essentially sponsoring the regime by not doing that. It really irritates me. It really fucking irritates me. You see it all the time. You know, sometimes you come across people, and I don't know, whilst traveling, for me at least, that are generally, I guess, more open-minded. Hence why they're, you know, on the road. And you know, you'll be in a public place. It might be a bar. It might be in a country where people don't even fucking speak English for the most part. And you know, you start with a good conversation. Of course, you know, it gets controversial because all good conversations do, especially if it's aligned to politics or that kind of stuff. And you know, you'll mention something that will be taboo in particularly American society, because they're all a bunch of pussies. And you can see the discomfort on their face. They start rocking in their chair and quickly trying to focus because they're worried that, I don't know, their fucking Apple phone might be listening, or someone might view their LinkedIn.
They start looking around. Who's listening? Oh fuck, shit. This is
This is a true story. I was once in a bar in Kataisi in Georgia. It was myself, an English guy, and an American guy who was a hedge fund banker of some kind on one of these sabbaticals, and total cunt. He went to, I think, Cornell, one of the kind of Ivy League institutions, and we got into a conversation quite smoothly. All three of us were drinking beers and all this kind of stuff, and I think at one point I took a picture of him because his hat was like in a weird position, and we were all laughing. I said, "Oh, look, here's a picture of your hat," and he looked at it. He was, "Oh shit, yeah, that doesn't really." Blah blah blah. An hour goes by. The English guy has to go back. We continue the conversation, and it gets to the point where he starts realizing I'm willing to go into more depth than perhaps he would be, and he starts to get really nervous. And all of a sudden, out of fucking nowhere, he says, "I want you to fucking delete that picture you took of me earlier," because it's one of those things where he's worried that these kinds of opinions, if they're associated with him, would end his career. So out of nowhere, he just lost his mind and just started screaming in this pub, "Delete that picture! Delete that picture!" And yeah, I confessed it. And it's one of those things where people are so paranoid because they know the Stasi's watching. And they really are watching. They really are listening. You know, all the applications that we use are being monitored 100%. This very phone call is being monitored. It goes into a supercomputer, a system where certain words are taken, and that almost creates a blueprint, a file rather, a profile for each and every person in society, which is, of course, the purpose of vaccinations as well. It enabled them to fast track all kinds of identification protocols, ID cards and such things, which will have your essential medical records and your personal beliefs all embedded into that code. And that's the idea, to have enough on society to indefinitely manipulate it. You want people to be malleable, and it's actually the same strategy that they use for bringing in new members to their clique. They always want people that have done things quite sinister in their past, or have certain fetishes or certain abnormalities that they're self-conscious about, or they don't want other people to know about because they're extreme, as we mentioned earlier, pedophiles, these kinds of sick sociopaths that are twisted and have obsessions with children in particular, are much loved by the status quo, because they know that they can, manipulate these people, and these people will be happy to take the rewards that they throw at them. And that's what they want for society. They want people to become affixed through that understanding that if they don't post the correct thing on Twitter, they're going to lose their welfare check. They're not going to get that tax rebate. They're going to, not going to get that lower premium on their insurance. It's all about manipulation through a kind of systematic construction of people's ideologies. And yeah, there we go.
I think the most successful person in that regard was Jimmy Savile, the biggest chav to get to the highest echelons of society through just being a dirty fucking predator. Yeah, absolutely. He got to the top of that pyramid, or near the top anyway. As far as the bottom rungs go, he got to the top, let's say.
Transition. Here's a word. I'm going to throw it at you. You go for it, because it's related to Jimmy. Gypsies.
Ah, yes. What an interesting bunch. It really, really, really does fascinate me how these people are able to exist amongst us, and literally live above and beyond the law. Like literally, like they can just like have horses and like ride them down the street, and they have whole like sites and all of this sort of stuff. Whereas like literally, there are people that go to prison for like dodging tax, or like, I don't know, not having their TV license, or like for really, whereas like these people like operate on like a wide scale kind of sense of illegality, and very, very rarely get held accountable. In fact, they're actually given special dispensation to do things that are clearly illegal. It's quite fascinating, and yeah, I'm interested in you sharing your theory on these people and who they are and how and why they're given such dispensation. And
Well,
to be
for
quite
that.
frank, it makes quite a lot of sense. The other things that you've said in the past, but nobody can describe it better than you, so I'll let you take the floor.
That's very generous of you. I'm sure there's many people that
No, not the way you can. No way.
maybe not. Maybe they're much lighter in their art. But there's come to mind that one of them I think will be recognizable by certain Brits of a particular age. They're probably like, I don't know, 25, 30 above at least. There used to be a show, a Channel 4 show, which is one of the main TV channels in the UK, called Big Fat Gypsy Wedding. And it was basically almost glorifying gypsies. It would follow gypsy communities around, just like it eventually follows any group of people around. And you know, it would go to, it was about weddings in particular. Weddings would be upwards for the more influential families, upwards of hundreds of thousands of pounds. They would fly the brides in on helicopters and all this stuff. Now, gypsies live off society. They are criminals. You know, every aspect of their existence is dependent on robbing, stealing from the average being. They don't get their money through legal means. They're not hardworking individuals. It is a culture. This is not a stereotype. This is not something that can be said to be, discriminatory and rude. This is accurate. This is something that Gordon Ramsay did a TV show, and he went over to Romania, and part of the kind of cooking show was to explore the culture as ordinarily TV shows do. You know, they mix the kind of culture up with the focus on national dishes and cuisines. And he was given the opportunity to try and consciously respond to being pickpocketed. So he was placed in a dark room. He had a money belt on, told that he was going to be robbed. And this was all organized. They brought the gypsies in, professional pickpockets. And yeah, they robbed him straight through his own hands. And as I have been robbed actually in Tunisia. And you don't even know. You have absolutely no idea. That's how talented that, because it's a culture. They're brought up. I've seen instances of gypsies drugging babies, often not their own babies, but sometimes their own babies, depending on the specific type of gypsy. Feeding them drugs and alcohol to make them look sicker, to kind of the buy so they can pocket as much change as they can. Yeah, there's instances in Romania where EU money was used to construct houses for them, and what they do is they go in, they would tear down everything of value, the tiles, the utilities, everything, and they would then move their animals into the ground floor and stay out in their caravans. Yeah, these people are given so much leeway, so much leverage that their camps, which are often, it's often land compulsory purchased by the government, or if the government have council land, which is public land, which is our land, our meaning the general tax-paying individual, and they're just given free rein to do as they please. The police never go anywhere near these places, and it's an absolute anomaly, as it's depicted again in movies like Snatch. These people are glorified as kind of heroes, as victims. When you think of World War II, the main cultures that spring up, it's always Jews, gypsies were the victims, even though the amount of Russians and Poles that were murdered by the National Socialists exceed greatly both of these, and in particular, gypsies that are a very, very tiny minority. And I just find it fascinating how they're given such leeway, such leverage. And by the way, yesterday, I met an English guy in Sofia. He lives in Bulgaria. He just flying back, and I started talking to this guy. He'd been married for 20 years to a Bulgarian. And we talked about gypsies because you see them everywhere in Bulgaria and Romania, of course. And by the way, the organized crime hub of Europe is a town called Craiova, which is in southern Romania, a gypsy town. And he said that this guy in his village was a gypsy and got into a dispute with an old resident about a car purchase, and just killed the old resident, murdered him, just fucking murdered him. And the police never do anything. So the best that the town could do was have him ousted from the town. So he got ousted from the town, and that was the punishment. Because remember, these people don't have social IDs, securities. They're influential, and people are freaked out and scared by them. No police officer wants to, involve themselves in a gypsy investigation, because these people are, for the most part, animalistic in their tendencies, primitive in their understanding and use of violence. and things like, and that includes things like rape as well. They have absolutely no care. And I've got so many stories about gypsies, and no one in the world likes them for the most part. There are, of course, people that can call themselves gypsies and are nice people. And of course, there's anomalies to be had everywhere. But there is, this is a truth. This is absolute gospel.
Anomalies.
I,
Yeah, sorry.
any country in the world, any fucking country in the world, and you can ask people, what do you think about gypsies? And no one's going to be like, oh, they're lovely people, aren't they? They're always lovely. They always take their trash out. They're always super polite. They don't steal from everyone. Always giving back to society, aren't they? No, they're not. They're absolute wankers. It's a culture of theft, of organized crime at its absolute fucking most menacing. And my theory about why they're given leeway is I think they're a tool. I think these people are so dangerous. I consider them some of the most dangerous people in the world. And when you see the kind of surface level characters on the street and their general behaviors, very uneducated beings that are content in using utter violence for the means of obtaining a chocolate bar and a bag of crisps. Just think what the most sinister fellows within that social arena are capable of. These are the people that are used by influential organized criminals, mafias, Italian mafia. Not to say that gypsies aren't mafia, they certainly are, but let's say more international mafias.
Albanian, Russian,
to do their dirty work. Human trafficking, gypsies, sex trafficking, it's all undertaken by gypsies. And I think when we look at the number of children that are missing in each and every country every year, these numbers are not a derivative wholly of, sex dungeons, which of course do exist for the obscene pedophiles that govern our realms. Frankly, there's just too many missing children to sustain even the largest minority of these people. These people are harvesting various reasons, these children. I think gypsies are used, as I said, for a multitude of evil purposes by the status quos, by the people with high up influence, the people that are self-proclaimed enlightened ones, hence the term elite, enlightened. They use them for all their dirty work, and I think that's why they exist. That's why they're given leeway. They are the undertakers of the underworld, let's put it like that. The real tools, because frankly, if you want someone to do something that the rest of society couldn't even comprehend, couldn't even think about without chundering themselves for the remainder of the day and the year, it has to be a culture that's bred outside of the reins of mainstream society, outside of normative moralistic values. Moralistic and normative values, even at their worst, can't compete with those from the lowest rungs of evil. And again, I'm not saying they're all gypsies fall within that realm, but if you think of the average gypsy and how they behave, and the average person in regular society, and then think of the worst person in regular society, what must the worst person be like in a gypsy society? Just imagine, because it's relative. It's pure logic here. That is a relative notion. So there we go. That's what I think. Obviously, we can go further, but it's what time is it? It's 43 minutes. So we could probably spend 2 hours on the relationship between Judaism and the origin of the gypsy, which is of supposedly of Brahmist origin, India, from Central and South Asia.
Yes, so they say. I mean, because you put like like the Roman gypsies, and then like you have like the Irish traveller, and maybe there's like two different lines that like meet in the middle somewhere. But yeah, that's it's very interesting to look into the history of them.
I think history before, can't even remember. There's just too many bloody facts and figures running through my mind. But I can't remember if it was to do with Turkey as well, because Turkey is definitely a prime when it comes to understanding the Hebrew and its associations with other kind of human factors, like the kind of gypsy culture and other strains of human society. But yeah, I guess we can leave that for another time. That requires an entire episode, I think, with more research. So it's kind
Yeah.
of understanding.
I mean,
What else?
the other thing that was worth talking. I mean, obviously, it's Euro season, and the other thing was to talk about the riggory of sports, the riggory of sports betting. It's the Euro season. You always get your customary shock. Austria, beat the Holland, who have gone out. Holland have gone out in the group stages of the Euros. England have finished top of the group despite only scoring one goal in 3 games, which is amazing. A win and a one. No, was it a 1-1 and a 0-0? Or was it? Yeah. Oh no, 2-0-0s. Was it 2-0-0s? Yeah. And they managed to go through. And yeah, of course, it's like so much of these results don't make sense when you look at the quality of players involved. And yes, absolutely, every dog can have his day, but it's very consistent and there's so much at stake. And then we look at, like the way the games are played and the tactics that are used that are completely counterintuitive and nonsensical. And one can just deduce that that the game plan was for a desired result, and the desired result was obtained. This might not be the case in all games, but it's certainly the case in a lot of games, and games that matter to the cabal that run the bookmakers and the casinos and the betting cabal, should I say, the betting faction of the cabal.
It's certainly a money laundering scheme, and I personally think most sport is rigged to a large extent, as much as they can, without being too obvious. And frankly, they're pretty bloody obvious as it is. But I think there's another angle. I was kind of thinking about it earlier because, they like to impose the rise and fall based on what culture they intend on sponsoring in the next age. I think we discussed before. The Europeans have had their age of glory, the Chinese have had their age of glory, the Persians, the Mayans. Everyone gets their spike because, again, the aim of the status quo is rotational farming. We're used just like any other domesticated farm animal. The intention is to utilize us for a set period of time, allow us to gain them something in a certain sphere of society, in a certain region, a certain terrain, and then the carpet is swept from beneath that specific culture and thrown across to another, to give them leverage and allow them to climb to the ascents of so-called success. And I think they do that with football. I think there's a big psychological operation where when they start to dismantle national pride in certain places, it's just insult after insult. It's just a mockery. It's just, and then at the same time, of course, they replace a country that perhaps in the past has had, less national pride or something that they want to, bolster further by giving them those wins, taking the wins from one and applying it to the other. And again, I think we've had topics where we've looked into kind of energies and the kind of electrical grid system for which sports certainly falls into the realm of. And I think that's discussed by one of Michelle Gibson's fanboys. I always forget his name, Chad something or other. And I think it's about kind of supplying charge to one reign to further undermine the prior. And that's why we're seeing 0-0 Slovenia. We're seeing a fucking football team like Iceland, which consists of volunteer dentists beating people that have been trained supposedly in the best sports clubs in the world. Money consistent to their skill set. People that are scoring wonder goals in domestic league matches, whether it's the Premier League or the Bundesliga or whatever, and all of a sudden they can't fucking play against a group of dentists and roofers. It doesn't make any fucking sense. The results that we've seen in this particular Euro, it's a joke. 0-0 to Slovenia. Slovenia. And I'm not saying that passion because I don't care about football at all. I think it's a total scam. But it's so sad how obvious it is. And there are certain games that come to mind. We've certainly touched on one which is relatively recent to this podcast, which is, of course, the 7-1 or 7-0 defeat of Manchester United by Liverpool. And all that was to do with occultism as well. The Red Devils versus what's Liverpool called? The red something. Anyway, the two Reds. And the purpose, yeah, it was all a cult system. These things are calculated. There's many of.
I mean, Man United are the Red Devils. I mean, that's not even covert. It's like they're just letting you know, like, we're the most successful club in England, and we're called the Red Devils.
Yeah.
And our greatest ever manager is an open Freemason, Sir Alex Ferguson.
Oh, they're all.
Yeah, Grand Lodge, Sir Walter Smith. But yeah, like Alex Ferguson, like, you know, high degree Mason, in with the FA, always had Fergie time, always given extra time at the end of matches, would get all kinds of special treatment. He'd get away with saying things that other managers couldn't say. Yeah, it was just a clear criminal. Anyway.
All criminals. And you brought up something I didn't know the other day with respect to what's his name? That
Harry
Greece
Redknapp.
Harry Redknapp, his bloody son-in-law is fucking Frank Lampard.
Frank Lampard, yeah.
We're talking about how, football is so rigged blatantly, but in my opinion, at least, you always need someone on the field. I'm not saying that all football
His
is.
nephew, it's his nephew, I think. It's his nephew, Frank, yeah. But like nephew, like sister's son or something like that. Yeah.
They always have people on the pitch to manipulate from the inside. And I personally think they're all in on it, but just indirectly. It's more a case of, you spend your life dedicated yourself to football from when you're a kid. It's your passion, it's your love. It's very hard. It's such a competitive environment to be in.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you get that gift, unconscious that, the system is completely rigged and everything is a joke. But you get that gift of playing for a team that you've always aspired to play for, and you end up in the top divisions. And then, of course, slowly, anyone with half a brain, and footballers are smart enough people, it takes intelligence to be at the highest rungs of any field of study or any sport or any just interest. And of course, they consciously are aware that things aren't quite right when their manager says you should play this way, and the entire team knows that's not how you should play, and they end up losing 4-0 to some shitty, second division team. What are they thinking about? Of course, they're aware that something's going on. They're aware of bookies. They're aware of the corruption. I don't think they're aware of the real reason necessarily. But they know full well that if they challenge, if they say, "Hey, what's going on here?" as perhaps many footballers have done, we've seen a lot of strange so-called accidents in recent history with footballers, dying in fucking helicopter crashes and at certain ages, or not getting the success they deserve based on their skill set, getting kind of thrown out to the dogs, out into the cold for unknown reasons. And perhaps it's because they spoke about things that they shouldn't have spoken about, and it's that example which is set, which kind of fizzles out and disperses amongst the rest of the crew, the rest of the team all across the world. So the players know full well that childhood dream will be gone at the click of a finger if they so much as mentioned to the manager, "Well, why did you do that? That clearly doesn't make any sense. What's going on?" So it's they're all complicit, but there are some that are posted, are openly undertaking own goals and getting red cards at certain times to really sway the match when necessary.
And there we have it.
There we have it.
Another episode, number 24, on the 26th of the 6th, 2024, which 2024 is 224, which is another 26. So you've got 26, 6, 26. And yeah, another great take in episode 24. We've just gone past midnight. We're both in the UK. This is the first time we've both been in the UK for a pod as well, isn't it? I think.
No, I had to come back to get the bike.
Yes.
But I'm here for another 20 hours, a little bit less than 20 hours now. Yeah, just came over to grab some stuff for the bike, do a few errands, and then back to the continent to continue the bike journey.
Yeah, the rest of the 3,000k. How many you've got? You've done about 2.5 already. 200, 2,000, 2.5.
500, pretty much bang on now, and another 500 to do until I get a break. And then after that, it will be pretty much another flat out 2,000-ish. Yeah. So looking forward to it though. I'm actually looking forward to it. It really is suffocating for me, at least, coming back to these cities and just seeing how people operate for the most part. It's just can't breathe at all. But I guess we'll leave it there and hope everyone's enjoys. And
episode
25 will come at some point, won't it, James?
Yep, at some point. Maybe another 500k. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. When the war starts etching its way closer and closer to our homes and our livelihoods, and but that's always exciting, isn't it? Having bombs going off outside your house or you're munching on the Snickers bar. It's one of those kind of novels.
Yeah. Uber Eats is on the way. You're on YouTube, and yeah, you look out the window, and the waves of barbarians. You're watching everything around you slowly turn into Mad Max and the Thunderdome. It's like a real life movie. It's like a live movie. It's a very immersive experience.
Oh, there we go. Let's hope that doesn't happen. At least while knowing my luck, I'll open the window now, so I hope it feels hungry. But yeah, cool. Thank you everyone for listening, and do share, do like, all that good stuff, and feel free to
comment, suggestions, all of that.
Send us some hate, some animosity about our mentioning of, I don't know, certain religions and whatever, and we'll be very happy to have something to giggle at. So cool. Au revoir, and I'll speak to you later, James.
All right, ciao for now. Adios.
Adios.